How long does it take to actually build a subdivision start to finish? I get asked this question on almost every single call that I have with investors. And today I'm going to give you the real answer and not just the sales pitch version. But that's actually not the question that kills deals. The question that kills deals is, what's the one thing that separates a deal that pencils from a deal that quietly bleeds you for 6 months before you realize it's underwater? So most investors don't find out until it's too late because they weren't thorough enough on the most important step. So what I'm going to do today is show you that step and the exact checklist that we run on every single deal before you ever put money down into that deal. And if you get through that step clean, there's a second thing that's waiting right after it, and it's the phase where good deals go to die, sitting on a city planner's desk while you're carrying costs pile up. And that's one big thing that deserves its own full breakdown, which I'm going to do next week, and also provide you the checklist on that process as well, which is the entitlement process. So let's start with the timeline, because this is really the number that investors always seem surprised by. Whenever I mention the timeline to investors, they typically are pretty surprised by how long a subdivision actually takes. And I was too, really, on my first deal. I thought it could be done a lot quicker, and I found out that it can't, or it doesn't go faster. So realistically, we budget a year for every phase. So there's three main phases to a subdivision. The first is entitlements, so we factor a year into that. The second is horizontal development, and that's another year. And then vertical construction, and that's another year. So that doesn't mean that 3 years is a hard rule. So some developments can take longer or shorter. Phases can overlap, especially in, a lot of what we're doing now is cottages, which there's phases that overlap there that decrease your time. And then, ultimately some cities move faster and some slower. So deals can compress or expand depending on all those things. But if you're underwriting a deal, and you're not budgeting close to a year per phase, you're really not underwriting properly. So entitlements take a year because you first have to put together your plan. So that typically takes anywhere from 1 to 6 months, depending on how complicated it is, but also it depends on what the city requires. So Garden City, for example, they require basically your entire application, all your engineering to be completed before you submit a plan. Whereas Boise doesn't require the engineering to be done. They really just require kind of like a simplified version, and you can get it submitted and then do the engineering as you work through that entitlement process. So then you submit your application, and the review process typically takes a month before you even have any meetings scheduled. So then you go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. That's usually a month or two after you submit your application. Sometimes maybe 3 months. And then you go in front of City Council after that, which is typically a month or two after the submittal or after the Planning and Zoning Commission. So then if City Council approves the project, you're ready to rock, right? Well, not really. So after City Council approval, you still have to now get your civil engineering plans approved. So City Council doesn't actually review the construction plans. They'll review them for approval, but they're not stamping those plans. So typically those construction plans actually have to go to the actual plan reviewers. And so once the plan is approved, you then have to go get the civil plans approved. So that you're going to have your sewer, your water, your roads, streetlights, all that approved through those individual agencies again. And then and then the city will stamp those plans. And that review process, after the city council signs off on the project, can take another 1 to 6 months, typically, depending on, again, how complicated the project and the plans are. And then once you have those stamped civil plans, that's when you have a fully entitled project and you're ready to break ground. So that means you can build houses, right? Well, no, that's actually not even the next step. So before you can build houses, you actually have to put in all the infrastructure in order to build houses. So building houses is what we refer to as going vertical. Putting in the infrastructure is the horizontal work. So horizontal improvements, what that means, that's sewer lines, water lines, your power, your roads, sidewalks, streetlights, fire hydrants, and a lot of times even the landscaping or the common landscaping. So not every subdivision, particularly with infill, requires all of this, but there is almost always some kind of improvements that need to be made to the site before you can even build a house. So depending on how complicated those improvements are, or how detailed or how much improvements you have to make, that horizontal construction can take anywhere from 1 to 6 months, or longer on larger subdivisions. But then you have to have the plat signed before you can build your homes. So if you're subdividing a property, you have to have individual lots in order to be able to build on. When you have those individual lots, you have individual addresses. But before you have those individual lots, you have to have the plat signed, which in typically that's 7 signatures from 7 different agencies that have to review your plat. Some of them also will have to go and inspect the site and make sure everything's built properly. And then so they review those and then they sign off on them. So that's 7 different agencies, 7 different signatures. Each one, that review process typically takes anywhere from a week to 2 months, depending on who the agency is. So again, that whole process can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And that's before you have new addresses and new individual lots that you can build new houses on. So once that process is done, so that whole process, that's why that development, horizontal development, takes a year. Is it's typically 1 to 6 months for construction, and then you have 3 to 6 months to get the plat signed. And so overall, it usually takes about a year. And then you can apply for your building permits once you have individual addresses and individual lots. So then the vertical phase, we also budget a year for. That doesn't mean it's going to take a year to build the house. What it is you first have to get permits. You can't even apply for the permits until you have an individual address. So once you have that plat finalized, now you can apply for the building permits because you have a final address. And that review process for those permits typically takes about a month. Now, certain cities and agencies, it could take a little bit quicker, particularly if you've had plans that have already been approved or permitted in that city before. That can shave off some time, but they still typically review them. But typically, it's about a month to get permits. And then you have construction. And if everything goes smoothly during construction, that process is typically 6 to 7 months. And then once it's completed, it typically, so if you're going to sell the project or the homes after they're completed, then you still have to budget in time to get that house sold. So time for it to be on the market until it gets under contract, and then time to close. So by the time that's all said and done, by the time you get permits, by the time you construct the houses, by the time you finally exit, that whole phase is typically a year. Now, if it's a slower market, or if the market is slowed down, you might want to budget extra time for it, or just plan on making sure that you price it properly to make sure it sells right away. So here's the thing. So that year per phase clock doesn't even start until you've cleared due diligence. So this is where I see even some of the most experienced investors, guys who've flipped dozens or even hundreds of houses, get tripped up, because due diligence on a subdivision isn't like due diligence on a flip. It's not just a house inspection and running comps. It's zoning, it's utilities, it's easements, it's soil, it's a dozen other things that show up or that don't show up until they actually cost you money. So a while back, when I first launched this system, we started building out our checklist. It's something that we've always done due diligence on, but we didn't have it organized in a way that made good enough sense to run a system like this. So when we launched the system, we started working really hard on our due diligence checklist that we could apply to every single deal instead of just going off of what was in my head. And so every single thing we run through, we run through each deal before we commit to raw land or an infill deal. So I'm going to share that checklist right now. Pull it up here. So this is what our 200-point due diligence checklist looks like. And I'm not going to go really in depth on this checklist. This is just what we do for each infill development deal we have. So up here is just the details on the deal. But then we have our checklist before we even have you write an offer. So that's kind of simplified. We have you start talking to lenders, that kind of thing. But then once it's under contract, we go to the next phase, going a little bit more in depth. And then what we then start doing is the first thing we'll actually do is schedule that first due diligence meeting with the city. That typically, depending on the city, that typically takes anywhere from a week to 3 weeks or 4 weeks to even just get in front of the city the first time. With Boise, it's running like 3 weeks right now. So that's why you mainly want to get longer due diligence periods, is that just even to get in front of the city with a plan, it typically takes a week to 3 weeks. But what we do before we ever even start talking to the city, so we apply to go get in front of the city and get on that wait list. But then before we ever even get in there, we actually answer almost all the questions before we ever even go talk to the planner. So once you get an assigned planner, you can talk to them further, but we go through and talk to all the different agencies that you would talk to, not even in your first meeting, but your second meeting with the city. So typically with the city, you'll have your first due diligence meeting. The different cities call that different things, but it's essentially your initial meeting. Early assistance is what it's called with Boise. And that's when you talk to an actual planner, they'll give you some feedback. But before we even go in there, we have a lot of information. And so we can ask specific questions about specific problems that come up. There's no such thing as a perfect deal. There's no such deal that doesn't have any kind of yellow or red flags. And so what our job is to discover what those yellow and red flags are before we ever even talk to a planner, so that you're going in with as much information as possible, and then you're helping, or the city is helping you solve those problems if necessary. Now, most of our deals, like we've had enough experience in this, most of those yellow and red flags, we know how to solve them. But if you're new at this, the city can help you solve them if you know them going into it. Then after that, so after that initial due diligence meeting, we also are going to try to get in that second meeting, which is more of the meeting where you actually talk to, this is typically called design review, or different cities call it different things, but design review, where you actually now are talking to different representatives of all the different agencies, or they've at least given you feedback. Well, we try to get all that feedback before we have that second meeting. So again, we have all those yellow and red flags discovered before we ever get in there. A lot of times we have that before we get into this first meeting. But we have all these different agencies we talk to. So Ada County Highway District, if it's Ada County, that's a big one that we get all the information from. Public Works, Idaho Power, Intermountain Gas, Veolia, Republic Services, that's the trash. We actually had a deal that got held up because of Republic Services. Everybody else basically signed off on it, and then Republic Services had a major issue. And then the fire department is another big one that can kill a deal or give their blessing on it. And then another one that came up actually on a recent deal was the school district. So that's another one that you want to reach out to. They don't always have a lot of input, but particularly if you're right next to or near a school. The Parks District is another one, especially on like today's deal. Irrigation district, you want to get your geotechnical engineers involved early. If there's a well on site, talking to the well company. So all of these things are part of our due diligence checklist that we run through on every single deal. And it's also why, sometimes if we have a truncated timeline on our due diligence, we can confidently move forward with a deal, even if we don't get through that, say, second meeting with the city. Ideally, we get through that second meeting, and even, in a perfect world, we don't close on a deal until it's fully entitled. That just helps further de-risk it. But our process is so thorough that we can actually be confident in these deals before you close on them with limited time, with a limited time for due diligence, I should say. So now that checklist, we've shown you that checklist. It's really what keeps our investors from ever closing on a bad deal. So we've had a couple of different development deals now where we didn't end up having our investors close, or we didn't close on them because things came up during that due diligence process that we wouldn't have known if we didn't dive so deep. And really, like on at least one of them, the people that were selling it were people that didn't do a deep enough dive on their due diligence and found out the bad information after they closed on the deal, and then they're either unloading it at a loss or um or trying to unload it at a loss. And on one of the deals, they weren't forthright with us on the limitations of that, so we found it during due diligence. But it's something I know they didn't know when they bought it, and then they were basically trying to offload it on somebody else. So ultimately, that's our I guess main advantage with due diligence is it's a very thorough process, and we're uncovering those any of those yellow or red flags. And again, there's no such thing as a perfect deal that has no yellow or red flags to it. I haven't seen one where it's cut and dry, like there's no complications with it. Now, the complication could be something really simple. That's an easy solve, especially now that we've done this a bunch. Something that looks like a complication for one person, which is like, oh, we have to pave the alley. Well, that's something we go no going into it, so we've already solved for that before we ever even have it under contract. And then there's other complicated more complicated issues that we uncover by going through our process. So really, we've got the a whole system built out for all of this, um, really with that due diligence, but then also with going through entitlements and making sure we can get a project actually entitled. And that's why we're so confident also in our deals that we back these up with our entitlements guarantee. So our entitlements guarantee is, if we get through due diligence, we say, like for today's deal, if we say, okay, we can for sure build 5 houses or subdivide this into 5 houses, as long as we get through due diligence and that remains, and we say, okay, we can do 5 houses, we're going to guarantee that. And if we don't get it entitled for 5 houses, we're actually going to waive our next fee on the next deal, or we'll apply that towards the horizontal costs. So we're backing up what we're telling you with our own skin in the game as well. And then on top of that, we also have our profit guarantees, which I've explained in previous calls, and we'll get it further in depth on other calls as well. So that's the life of a subdivision: due diligence up front to keep you out of a bad deal. Entitlements get you the right to build. The horizontal infrastructure is the construction in the ground, and then the vertical to actually build the homes. So a year of each for each one of those phases: entitlements, horizontal, and vertical, generally speaking. And then every phase carries its own risk if you're not managing it right. So knowing the phases is one thing. Knowing how to actually engineer around them is where the money gets made. And so I'm going to show you what that looks like on an actual deal that came up this week. And that's our deal of the week this week. So we've got a single family home. Let me pull up my check or my infill deal list here. Okay, so we have a single family home. It's on Cassia Street. This sits on 0.43 acres, and it's 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, 1,895 square feet. Now, we looked at this a few different ways. This is actually the third different way we looked at it. We originally looked at it, and I'll show you the site plan here in a minute, but we thought, okay, we can split one lot off and build a house. Then we also looked at it as, well, the lot's big enough. We can actually, it's 0.43 acres, so almost a half an acre. We can actually, it's zoned for the density. You can fit up to 5 units. So we said, okay, we can add 4 cottages to this house and keep the house. Well, the house itself, I'll show you kind of the condition here. Internet's slowing down. So the house itself is not in bad condition. It's very livable, especially as a rental. So that's kind of what the benefit of this property is too, which I'll get into further here in a second. But it's definitely livable. It's in good condition. It's just dated, right? So this isn't going to sell for top dollar when you go to sell it, but somebody would absolutely live here. It's definitely in livable condition. Looks like the carpet's been replaced relatively recently. Other than that, it's just a little bit dated, but absolutely it's rentable. And so we looked at this as, okay, we can either fix up the house, and then, split a lot off and build a new house next to it, or build four additional cottages, behind it and to the side, or we can basically tear down the house and build 5 new homes. And ultimately, that's what we determined was the highest and best use. Number one, because it's the most profitable, but number two is, it's you get the most doors out of it, and the for the location, that's definitely the highest and best use. So in fact, let me pull up the site plan here, or the overhead, sorry. So this is right next to Cassia Park as we're waiting here. It's on a dead end street. So this is it comes off of, I think, Orchard or Curtis, one of those roads. And then dead ends at Cassia Park. And so it's just a private or a public street, but it dead ends here at the park. There's not even parking on this side of the park. It's over on the other side. And so this is the lot here, and then it dead ends at the park. And so it's surrounded on 2 sides by this park. So on this side is the park, and then behind it even is the park too, which is really beneficial for, finished homes, because like when I show you the site plan, when we split this up, all 5 houses would back up to the park, which would be a huge selling point for that property. So this park has, baseball field, has some pickleball courts. It's got kind of a walking track all the way around. It also runs along the canal here. I actually used to live over here and used to frequent this park quite a bit with the dogs. So it's a really, really cool park. And great spot, great location on the central bench. It's just down the road from a lot of shopping. It's close, like 5-minute drive to the freeway, maybe 10-minute drive downtown, if that. So great location overall. So what the numbers look like on this deal. This number, so 390,000 is how we penciled this, but this is putting 50% down on the purchase. So the way we can engineer this deal to basically reduce your risk and reduce your out of pocket. This was assuming, okay, we're just going to tear down the house, and you can get, a 50% down loan on the land all day long. But what we can do, because you have an existing house and you can rent it out, it's going to take some time to entitle and put the horizontal in. So you can actually buy this house with a traditional mortgage on the front end. Maybe you put 30% down instead of, 20% down or 25% down. Or, if you're looking for a house to live in, you can actually get a traditional mortgage on this. You live in it for 2 years, so you get it entitled, you go through that entitlement process. And then you can also put in the horizontal on this, because you're not having to bring a road into the subdivision at all. Let me pull up the site plan here, so it's a little bit more clear what I'm talking about. Okay, so since there's already a house that's sitting here, or already a road and everything, you don't actually have to build any kind of road into the subdivision. So a lot of subdivisions or infill subdivisions we have to bring in a new road, and then that kind of creates some problems if there's an existing house on being able to keep it through the subdivision process. But you can get it entitled, so that takes a year, and then you have to put in the infrastructure. So in order to have this 5 separate lots, you have to put in, this will probably have to widen the road. I think it's 27 feet right now. The city is most likely going to require 33 feet. So you have to widen the road a little bit right here. Then you also have to put in sidewalks, but then we'll also have to bring in the sewer and water lines to each lot. So we just have to stub them. You just bring them in from the street right here. So it's not super complicated. And then you typically will have to upgrade the power as well. And so typically you'll upgrade a transformer, and then the Idaho Power will run power underground to each lot. So that's all part of the subdivision process. You can do that though, because the house sits right about here on this lot, right kind of in the middle. There's plenty of room to put in all the infrastructure without having to tear down the house. So we can actually put in all the horizontal infrastructure around the around the house while it's still there, you're living in it or have it rented out. And then once all that infrastructure is done, now you can get a new subdivision plat and all new addresses, and then you tear down the house. And there's a possibility even. Let me see. Let me copy this here so I don't mess this up. But let me show you this plan here, which we could theoretically build this house and this house and still keep this one remaining. Eventually, this would have to get torn down because you don't have parking for this house. So you couldn't really keep this. And ultimately, you get better, more profit and better profitability if you tear down this house or sell it and have it removed. But theoretically, you could even build these two houses, at least this one, bare minimum, possibly this one as well, before tearing down this house. And then that reduces your risk even more, reduces your carry costs because you still have your loan on this property. And then once these two are built and sold, then you tear down this house and build your other three houses. So that's a way to kind of engineer a deal some different ways. Now, one thing I will say that is going to come up during due diligence and during the process of getting this entitled with the city. I already know this because it's just we've done this enough. I know it's going to be an issue. Is that this turnaround right here? So this looks like a turnaround, right? The problem is this turnaround, the diameter is only 24 feet. Well, the required diameter for a turnaround for a fire apparatus is 48 feet. So meaning this has to be 96 feet total. So right now, where it's only 24 feet, it actually doesn't meet fire code. And so I know the city is going to have an issue with this. And so that's right now the red or the yellow flag I see. Now, more than likely, what we can do is say, okay, well, this is city property. So you just have to, you know, you basically have to turn this fire turnaround or use the city's property to turn this fire turnaround into an actual fire turnaround instead of just a car turnaround here. Um, even though, if this has been existing for decades, it's one of those things that's going to come up and the city's going to make us do it. So almost hands down, they'll for sure make us do it. Now, what we would really try to avoid is it cutting into this property whatsoever. I can't guarantee that without going through that due diligence process. That'll be one of those things that we work through with due diligence. Ideally, because it's already a park, we just address it inside the park. There's plenty of room to do a turnaround inside this park property without cutting into these parcels. It's just something that we would have to work through with due diligence. There is a slight risk that they say, okay, you have to start with where it starts now, and then do the radius from there, and then we could end up losing one lot, or maybe not even necessarily losing one lot, but making that lot smaller. So there is a possibility there. It's just one of those things that we'll have to work through with due diligence. But that is a cost that we'll most likely have to absorb. Now, it's not, crazy expensive to pave this. It's really pretty inexpensive, especially when it's spread out over 5 units. It's just one of those things that I know that will come up during due diligence. Okay, getting back to the spreadsheet. Okay, so 390,000. So notice if you put down, let's say you get this as a traditional mortgage with, let's say, 30% down. Could be less than that, but now your out of pocket cost actually goes down below 300,000. The other thing that this number doesn't factor in either. So over here in your holding costs on the existing house. So I factored in basically paying for a land loan on this for 3 years, and then rolling that land loan into the construction loan. So, but your traditional mortgage is going to be less expensive. And so this would go down out of pocket. Then I've also, for rental income, only factored in renting it for a year, where this could be ultimately 2 years, possibly even 3 years. But then your profit actually could go up as well. So basically, depending on how we structure this, your out-of-pocket costs could get down close to 250,000, and then also your timeline could go up or down depending on how many houses we build at first. So to build them all five at the same time in the subdivision, it's typically going to take 3 years. But if you look at your total ROI, so if you get a traditional mortgage where you put 30% down, your out-of-pocket costs are a lot less. The other thing too is the one thing I didn't really factor into this yet is the money you would get back from selling that original house. You'd get you'd when you go and sell that original house, you would actually get probably about 100,000 back. So now you're in it for only 167,000 when you're actually ready to go. Oh, sorry, sorry, we're not selling the original house. My bad. We're not selling the original house. That's why this is 0. That's factored into if we only did one split. So anyway, so you're 267, potentially down close to 250. If you can do a traditional mortgage on it and then get it built out, entitled. Now the lender, some construction lenders, you're actually going to still be able to not have to go additional money out of pocket here. Now, when I look over here at this number compared with the loan to value and loan to cost, so this is factoring in just financing the construction costs only. So there's actually room here still where that 50% down works in the 70% loan to value, even maybe a little bit more than that. And then in particular too, if we're not building all 5 houses at the same time, these numbers are going to look really good. So if you're only building, let's say 2 houses to begin with, this construction cost is going to be a lot lower. And so we always look at these loan to values and loan to cost to make sure that they align with our construction lenders. This loan to cost is on the lower end. Sometimes it'll go up to 90%, but we look at this mainly to see, okay, can we do what we're trying to do? Do these line up approximately with what the lenders will do? And they do on this project. So we know that the out-of-pocket expense is going to be roughly this number. And again, we dive further into this during due diligence. Once we actually talk to the lender's going to underwrite it. And then we'll be able to underwrite it further. Your total entitlement cost. So this is per unit. So we just put a land value of 0. The land is obviously worth something, but the house isn't worth anything. So you're basically paying under 100,000 per lot. And then you have your entitlement cost per lot of about 16,000. And then your development cost of about 25,000 per lot. That's factoring in putting in your curb gutter sidewalk, widening the street. I don't think I have the number in here for paving the fire turnaround, but I do have a kind of a discretionary budget in there that for like the stuff that comes up. So this should still be pretty accurate. And again, that fire turnaround is, minimal expense per unit also. And then if you were to go and sell the lots after it's entitled and after it's developed out, I know these would sell, if they're on the market today, they'd sell for 165 each. So you could actually make money on this deal still if you just sold the lots. And ideally, the people that we work with, they are actually going all the way through the vertical. And in this case, you would actually want to do that for sure, because that's where you make all the money. And the reason why this works is because, okay, so we can build, there's different size houses we can build on this property. What comps out well is 1875 and 3-bedroom, 3-bath, or 3.5 bath. There's a comparable nearby that sold. And this street with backed up to the park, this is probably pretty conservative. I could even see this going for, 10 or 20,000 more than this. And then at the same token too, you could actually decide, okay, well, let's build one of these houses or a couple of these houses with ADUs on them. The property, the depth of the lots are about 128 feet after you factor in putting in the additional sidewalk and everything. And so it actually still gives you space where you can actually build a full-size 2-story home and still have room in the backyard where you can add a detached ADU. And then the new city code, they just passed a few weeks ago or a couple months ago now. is you can actually have up to 2 ADUs on every property. So it would be a little bit tough to do 2 detached ADUs and still build a good sized house. But what you can do is you can actually build that ADU in the basement. So you can have a basement ADU that's, doesn't increase the footprint of what you're building. So that's the footprint of the house. So you have a separate entrance for that basement ADU. And then you can have also your detached ADU in the backyard. And now you can turn that single new build into 3 separate doors. That, one you can sell to investors. It's going to cash flow really well. This sale price would actually go up and then the square footage would go up, but the sale price would go up. It'll still looks like it would cash flow well for investors. And the other aspect of that too is, when you're looking at this deal, so you would actually, so this number is if you build and sell 4 houses and decide to you want to keep one. So this is the way it's underwritten, not including if you build any of them with ADUs, but let's say you build 4 houses to sell and you don't build ADUs with any of them, you actually get $500,000 back out of this deal. So some of that's your own cash. So 267, remember, is still your own cash. So you get that 500,000 back. So you're getting your $267,000 back, but then you're also still profiting 230,000 just by selling one house. And now you can both make a profit and you can keep a house, or build and or build and keep a house, I should say, for what it costs to build it, minus the 230,000. So essentially that looks like that's this number plus, so about 400,000 to build it, minus your $230,000 profit. So you're actually, you're in it for 170,000 essentially to build and keep a house. And then, again, so if you want to keep that as a rental, you can add ADUs to it. So your build costs will kind of go up a little bit. But it's a great play. If you want to build them, or build rentals or keep rentals, it gives you a huge amount of leverage to be able to, build and sell some and then keep one with multiple doors. Okay. And then I think that's about it on this one. Brian, do you have any questions with this at all?
No, I'm good right now.
Cool. I'm just going to briefly touch on the other ways we underwrote this, because there are other ways to do this. This is if you did it as a cottage village. So this is the scenario where you would actually keep the existing house. We actually even have it where you'd fix it up. So you'd fix it up, sell it, and then build and sell 4 cottages. So you still profit a decent amount of money here. This house does have a profit. Well, the house itself is probably only worth 380,000. So they're asking a little bit of a premium because of the location and the larger lot. So you're paying about an extra 100,000 for the larger lot and or the location. So when we factor that in, you're still basically paying for these extra, the extra lots, but you're still a good price for that. And ideally, somebody can come in here and get this at a much better price, but we don't assume that. You still make money on cottages. And again, these cottages would sell, I think bare minimum is 399. These would be 3-bedroom, 2-bath. One on the MLS, that'd be about 1,100 square feet. They're 1,000 floor area, but the way you measure it for the MLS is a little different. But I think even this location and everything, these would probably sell close to 425, maybe even a little bit more than that. But at 400,000, you're still making 45,000 per unit. And then we would factor in fixing up the original house, reselling it. You'd still make 50,000 on the existing house. So this is another way you could to keep the existing house. You can basically fix it up first and then rent it, or fix it up at the end, or whatever, however you want to do that. And then this deal also makes money if you just want to split a single lot from it. So again, this isn't as attractive, but you could keep and fix up the existing house, build and sell another house, and then you still make 75,000. So You don't make as much by only doing one house here because you still have to put all the same infrastructure as you do for 5. So your development costs per unit is a lot higher. And same thing with your entitlement costs. So that's why this profitability is less per house, because it's only divided over one house instead of over 5. And then you make money on the flip a little bit as well. There's another deal that's coming on the market. I think it's coming soon still. This is actually one that is a flip. It's actually another flipper that's building, or that's finishing this up. It's actually nearby, like right around the corner, actually, even, or a few blocks away, I guess. But it's nearby, Central Bench again. It's actually fixed up, so if somebody is looking for something to, live in, it's going to be a great remodeled home, and you can still make 100 grand by building and selling another house. So you can split it off, build and sell another house. Again, the resale values on this new construction is pretty good in these specific areas of the bench. So this is another one that could look good for an individual investor. And theoretically, again, if you did this as a more conventional mortgage, you could reduce your out-of-pocket expense as well. And then anybody that's watching these replays, these other deals that I've had, this deal I think is still available from last week on Cloverdale. And then this one on Hartman was actually the week before. That one is still available. So we have a couple of different cottage villages available as well still. So anybody that's looking for, a good return, really, these deals are great because it's, particularly with a lot of these cottage villages, you can bring a product that's, it hits a much needed price point and make money, and it's kind of a win-win for everybody. It's providing much needed housing. You have the end buyer that's really happy, with the product and the price point. You make a lot of money. We make money obviously building them, so it's kind of a win for everybody. All right, and then just again, kind of recapping today's deal. So there's 3 different ways to do it. The most beneficial, most profitable way is to, get it entitled, put in the horizontal infrastructure, all while keeping the house in place. You have it rented out, or if you're looking for a place to live, you can do this all while you're living there. And then once it's time to go vertical, that's when you could actually, a lot of times you can actually have that house picked up and moved. So somebody would buy it. They wouldn't spend a lot of money on it, but it's, it's an expense that you don't have to have, and maybe even put a little bit of money in your pocket. Or you can also have the fire department come out and burn it down if you can't get rid of it, and they'll actually basically do that for free because they like the training. So that's always an option as well. And so essentially you have a lot that you can build 5 homes on, and what that looks like might look like different for every investor. So if you're looking more for, get that, put as much cash in your pocket at the end, you just build all of them to sell as single family homes. The investors later down the road that buy them can always add ADUs, or you try to pre-sell some of them and give the option of having the ADUs built with them. And then the other investor that might look at this says, okay, I want to hold on to these long term, or at least 1 or 2 of them long term as rentals, and then we build them with that in mind and build the rentals for you, so you can build them with the basement ADU, with those detached ADUs. So there's multiple ways to look at this, and there's also multiple ways to finance this. So our original underwriting, we try to be really conservative on the money down, so we put 50% down, but you could actually, realistically, there's a pathway to doing this for between 250,000 and 300,000 out of pocket total, and ultimately profiting over $500,000 from those. It just takes about 3 years to complete the deal. If you do it with 2 phases of construction where if we're able to build those first 2 houses and keep that the existing house until those 2 are done and sold, this is actually going to turn close to 4 year, 3.5 or 4 years. But it reduces your risk, and it still has like this annual return is insane. I don't think anybody is, consistently getting these kind of returns in their other investments that they have. So that's the power of infill development, particularly on the right deals and with the right structure. Ultimately it's using leverage, and some people don't feel comfortable using leverage, but these numbers typically work out really well, and the lenders wouldn't lend on them if they weren't structured well for the lender as well, which also reduces the risk for you if the lender's willing to lend on it. All right, that's pretty much all I have for today. So if you're watching this online, what you can do, so next week we're going to dive a little bit deeper into our entitlements process checklist. And then we're also going to hopefully have a new deal of the week. So we do that every week. We send out this the deal of the week. If you're watching it online, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and get notifications. We've decided we're going to drop this replay on YouTube consistently at the same time every week. So we're going to do the replay at 4 p.m. every week. We've done that for the last couple of weeks. So it's going to be the same time every week. And then you can also sign up online if you click the link to get onto our weekly live call. So the live call is nice if you have questions that you want answered live. You can always raise your hand and ask questions. The other thing that we can do live, or when you're on live too, is you're seeing the deal as as we're presenting it, and you're not watching it days later, because a lot of times some of these deals do sell right away. In fact, I would be surprised if this cash deal lasts even over the weekend, because it's going to be appealing to both flippers and also developers. And so I would actually be surprised if this is on the market still next week. So if you're watching the replay on this days later, these aren't always available. So the best thing to do is hop on the live call if you're actively looking for something, get your questions answered. And then we can also, if you have follow-up questions afterwards or want to talk through your specific details or your specific details on your specific situation, we can actually cover those in a call afterwards instead of you just watching this and kind of wondering. So that's where it benefits to hop on the live call. You can sign up for that on the link for the in my bio there. You just hop on that, find your next 6-figure infill deal call, and sign up for the next call. And appreciate you watching either live or online. And until next week, I will see you guys later.